Good afternoon. My name is Lamia Betzer, and I'm a medical doctor and a surgeon, but most importantly, I am a humanitarian worker. I have the pleasure to open this webinar this afternoon on protection of first responders and healthcare workers in conflict and complex emergencies. This webinar is a side event of the Euro-Mediterranean Forum for Disaster Risk Governance, Health Preparedness and Networking Advancement, organized by the CEMEC, the European Centre for Disaster Medicine, with the Europa Major Hazard Agreement collaborating centres. Our schedule is very tight, so I will give the floor quickly to Christoph Ziemann, Executive Secretary of the Europa Major Hazard Agreement, for the opening remarks.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor and giving me the possibility to address this important webinar. I'm just going to say a couple of words of the context and explain to you what is the Europa Major Hazards Agreement of the Council of Europe. The Council of Europe has worked since 1949 to protect human rights and since 1967 to conserve natural heritage. The Council of Europe and its 46 member states are committed to the achievement of the UN Sustainable Development Goals and contribute specifically through lenses of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. The Europa Major Hazards Agreement was established in 1987. It is the oldest European and Mediterranean regional platform for cooperation in the field of major natural and technological disasters. It has long contributed and continues to support the global effort on disaster risk reduction as specified in the Sendai Framework Agreement. The link between the environment and human rights is increasingly recognized today. A healthy environment is essential for the protection of human rights, while environmental degradation can lead to severe violation of these rights. Living in an unhealthy environment marred by pollution, loss of biodiversity, impacted by ever more frequent and more extreme weather events, which are amplified by human intervention or climate change, can negatively impact our well-being and fundamental rights. Ultimately, this degradation can undermine democracy itself. Those of you who have worked with Europa know this perfectly well, but please allow me, for the benefit of those who are less familiar with our work, to say some words recalling the basic principles behind Europa's work. The agreement stands on two pillars. At the political level, each state is represented by its minister responsible for dealing with natural and technological major hazards. They are assisted by the Committee of Permanent Correspondents, who play a role of permanent relay between national authorities and the agreement. At the scientific and technical level, the specific role of the specialized Euro-Mediterranean centers is to develop projects both at national and regional level, which aim to improve awareness of and resilience to major risks within the population. We are meeting here on the fringes of one of such meetings. Europa appreciates very much our ongoing and mutually beneficial cooperation with the UNDRR. We are looking forward to making a contribution to the global platform for disaster risk reduction to be held in Geneva, Switzerland on the 4th to the 6th June 2025. Dear participants, the first thing that comes to mind when thinking about the safety of first responders and healthcare workers in conflict zones and non-permissive environments is systematic destruction and increasing wartime assaults on health facilities in conflict zones, such as in Ukraine, Gaza, or other war zones. We have in mind also the 2016 United Nations Security Council resolution on the protection of healthcare workers, the sick, the wounded, hospitals in war zones. When the Security Council resolution was unanimously adopted, the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon urged all member states, parties to the conflict, and other relevant actors to heed the Council's demand by facilitating humanitarian access, developing domestic legal frameworks that protect health facilities and medical workers. He demanded training armed forces so they understand their obligations, and he underlined prosecuting those responsible for such attacks and other violations. We all know that the reality on the ground is far away from this call. From the beginning of the codification of international humanitarian law, which is to say from 1864 Geneva Convention, the subsequent Geneva Conventions of 1906 and 1949, Medical personnel exclusively assigned to medical duties must be respected and protected in all circumstances. They lose their protection only if they commit, outside their humanitarian function, acts that are harmful to the enemy. The scope of protection was expanded in Article 15 of the Additional Protocol 1 that covers civilian medical personnel in addition to military medical personnel in all circumstances. Despite this well-established international law, it is sadly not uncommon that this aspect is violated during conflicts. Another important shortcoming in international law was identified in the aftermath of the 26 December 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami and similar disasters of such magnitude. As a response, the international community engaged to elaborate and conclude a legally binding instrument on the protection of persons in the event of disasters. This elaboration of the treaty was entrusted to the United Nations. While the Sendai framework provides guidelines for disaster risk reduction, a future instrument, such as this convention, would enshrine disaster risk reduction in international law, reinforcing the commitment shown by member states and complementing the existing guidelines. Importantly, the draft articles of the convention specify the modalities of international cooperation in the event of disasters. Article 16 on the protection of relief personnel, equipment, and goods states that the affected state shall take the appropriate measures to ensure the protection of relief personnel and of equipment and goods present in its territory or in territory under its jurisdiction or control for the purpose of providing external assistance. With the increase and frequency of climate-related disasters and more of the world most vulnerable to their impacts, this is timely initiative for legal frameworks to go beyond voluntary agreements. In December 2024, the UN General Assembly adopted Resolution 79/128, deciding to conclude an international convention on the protection of persons in the event of disasters by the end of 2027. By making disaster risk reduction a legal obligation, this convention could give member states greater incentive to act with urgency to mitigate rising risks. The combination of voluntary soft law, such as the Sendai framework, and legal framework to require that states offer protection from disasters can help ensure that when disasters strike, the risks would be greatly reduced for everyone, everywhere. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Christoph. I think this sets really the bigger frame on where this webinar will focus on. However, the added value that we really want this webinar to have is to start from real life experiences. So we're going to have two panels of experts that are all people with extensive experience in the field, that have a very diverse background, and that will help us reflect on how can we protect our first responders and healthcare staff, starting from lessons learned, what worked, what we in our experience saw that made a difference, and what challenges we faced, but also how did we manage to overcome them. So the first session, without further ado, will be chaired by my colleague Emanuele Bruni, Program Area Manager for Emergency Operations for WTO Euro. So I'll give the floor to Emanuele. Thank you, Emanuele. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Lamia. So first of all, I would like to ask, we have 4 panelists for this session, and I would like to ask them to introduce themselves, just mentioning, of course, their name and their position, and this can definitely put things in framework, and then we will start with the session per se. But please, Olivier, if you want to start.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Olivier Agon. I'm living in Geneva. Until the beginning of May this year, I was the medical director for the Swiss humanitarian aid under the government of Switzerland, and was deployed in lots of different situations, like the war in Libya, also the war in Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you, Olivier. Now, Christopher.
Hello, my name is Christopher Stokes, Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders. 30 years of experience with Médecins Sans Frontières, nearly always in conflict areas. previously as a general director, now more recently as an emergency coordinator and senior advisor, heavily involved in the last 2 years in Gaza and in Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. And Yves.
Good afternoon. My name is Yves Gibbons. I'm the head of hospital services for the International Committee of the Red Cross, ICRC. Myself have been working for the last 15 years in conflict areas, and where the ICRC would take me. Back to you.
Thank you, Yves. Good work. Loris, in 2 seconds, over.
Yes, this is Loris De Filippi. I'm working as a health specialist for UNICEF in Gaza at the moment. I was working for almost 30 years in the humanitarian action, first with the MSF and then with the UN system.
Thank you very much, Loris. And the presentation of our panelist is complete. I really thank Christopher because he gave really a framework, so I don't need to repeat much of what I was saying. But just before giving the, let's say, the initial kickoff, I wanted to mention that definitely the reason we are here is because we are noticing a bit of changes in the amount of attacks on healthcare, and this is mostly also touching the people in the front line. My initial question before going to the lesson learned will be some kind of personal, let's say, qualitative observation, but also if you have some evidence, some data or something, but there's no need of numbers. It's rather more like observation in is what we are trying to say today something that is true. Is there a change in the last 3, 4, 5 years in the attacks of healthcare? Have you observed that in your experience? And then obviously we allocate for this, Oliver, 3-4 minutes just to allow also some questions online. And why not to ask the other panelists to intervene on this specific topic. And then we will go on the lesson learned where I want Christopher to start. Olivier.
I think obviously the situation really jeopardized now for several years. We have an increasing number of attacks on healthcare facilities. We have an increasing number of healthcare attacks on healthcare workers. And I think this is something that it is really absolutely not acceptable. The other thing is when we are speaking about healthcare workers, probably we need to make a small distinction between national healthcare workers who are coming from the local community and also expats. And for us, for the national healthcare workers, I mean, the situation could be extremely difficult because depending from which ethnia, culture or religion they are coming from, situation could be extremely difficult to negotiate to get access to the victim. The second point for the expat, obviously we need to prepare ourselves. The organization itself needs also to, I would say, within the frame of the duty of care, give all the information and the means to protect the healthcare workers in the operation in the field. That's why improve the preparedness and in addition of the readiness of the organization to support the healthcare workers, and also improve the training of the healthcare workers, because the word which is absolutely important now, goodwill is not enough. We must really prepare ourselves because we will face violence, we will face safety issue, we will face security issue. That's why prepare ourselves, prepare the organization is absolutely key.
Thank you very much, Oliver. And I don't know if there are questions online, but also to reinforce a bit your statement, I invite the colleagues, and this is not obviously to advocate for WHO, it's just a database, but there is a WHO database, it's called Surveillance on Attack on Healthcare. I invite people online to click on this and to simply empirically see how the changes have occurred between, let's say, 2018 and 2020 and nowadays. The system started in 2017, so we cannot have the historic of the past, but definitely there is an increase. However, thank you, Olivier, for the initial kickoff, really. And now I would like to move on, and I will give you the floor later on again, Oliver, obviously, but asking to Christopher. Christopher, in our previous discussion, you mentioned a couple of lessons learned, and particularly I'm interested, first of all, on the operational side, and then we may move to the individualist, but this might also be interested on another point. And what is, let's say, the operational change? What is the practical tip we might give to the people that are listening in order to deliver and being safe?
Okay, so thanks, thanks for that. And I wish I could give you a one-line recipe saying you do this, everything will be okay. But unfortunately, that won't be possible. So it's multifactorial. Perhaps by way of introduction, to say that, as was suggested perhaps by the other panelists, we have seen in the last couple of years an increase on attacks on healthcare and health structures. And in Doctors Without Médecins Sans Frontières, we've actually measured the number of critical incidents that we have been involved in or against us in our projects. And we've seen very, very high numbers, mainly led by the contexts of Gaza, Sudan, Ethiopia, and Haiti. And there are lessons to be drawn from each of them. So traditionally in MSF, we've insisted on the core mandates of humanitarians: neutrality, impartiality, independence, and especially impartiality. And we've focused on, let's say, proximity to communities, being close to people in need, having very visible kind of operations, and a strong negotiation strategy. And then we had some subcategories like clear identification, deconfliction, which has been an increasing issue since the destruction by at the US Air Force of our hospital of Kunduz in Afghanistan, which led, by the way, to UN Resolution 2286, which was pushed by Médecins Sans Frontières, that was mentioned in the introduction. But in the new warfare, we are seeing a number of paradoxical difficulties, and I can give some elements as to how we're overcoming them. One of the features we're seeing is the use of high precision drones, for example. And you would think that with more precise weapons, ambulances, aid workers, hospitals would be more protected. Paradoxically, that hasn't been the case, as we've seen. And we've noticed that one of our biggest issues when it comes to security, traditionally it's thought of to be, the threat is thought of to be coming from armed groups in low intensity conflicts, which is true in Haiti, but actually the majority of the hospitals that we've been working with that have been destroyed have been by governments that have signed the UN Security Resolution 2286 and voted for it. So Russia and Israel, for example, in Gaza and in Ukraine. And when it comes to some of the aspects that we believe still work and that can help health workers work. So I mentioned proximity quite clearly. The readability of your operation, to be able to explain it to the communities and to the armed actors. If you do very complex technical assistance operations, it's a harder sell. People often don't understand, so what are you really trying to do? But if you're working in the hospital, working in the clinics, and you have a clear strategy around that and communicating around it, it does help. We've had to invest quite heavily in deconfliction, which is really just about sharing the GPS locations, but it's more than that. It's actually engaging with military actors to make sure they are keenly aware that as a medical organization, we have nothing to hide, and we're very transparent. We share all the actions that we do on the field. And this has been very important for us. Also, one element that will help, obviously you have to understand the interests of stakeholders, and you have to be realistic, because it's quite rare today that you are granted access based on international humanitarian law. And this has probably always been the case. There's always been a strong element of what is in it for me from the part of armed actors. Do they see the usefulness in their own terms of the medical assistance we're providing. And this has been one of the most difficult things for us. For example, in Haiti, we're treating wounded gang members and we're treating wounded members of the police. And this is actually, you would think that would help protect us to some extent, but it's actually increased our exposure. Because one side accuses us of treating, being the doctors of the gangs, and the others of being the doctors of the police. So the usefulness there of that kind of action has been a bit more problematic. In Gaza, we have to be honest, we're seen as being, so we're one of the largest, one of the 3-4 largest private providers of healthcare. And we've analyzed that we are today useful to both sides of the conflict, including to the state of Israel, that does want to provide a minimum of healthcare service under some conditions. So the analysis of what the stakeholders want is a key point. Another lesson, perhaps for us in the last few years, has been the danger of mobile operations. So this again is paradoxical. We have noted historically that having ambulances, mobile clinics, etc., has exposed us heavily. A lot of the attacks have been on roads and in mobile operations, but that has shifted in the last few years to hospitals. So that's also a new challenge. Sorry.
So absolutely, thank you for this contribution. I just want to summarize 2-3 points. Christopher was mentioning one, which was already started by Olivier. Changing the warfare. This is absolutely one point. Number 2, and adaptability that have been found by, in this case, it was mentioned to MSF, but we might think about other also actors. Proximity to the population changing, an approach to community. Number 3, he was talking about deconfliction, which is civil military. And number 4, he was talking about, however, this double change on the proximity and let's say the exposure. And finally, it was discussing about mobile. I would like now, based on also, we've been having a previous conversation about this in Geneva, and I recall that Dr. Yves Gibbons, Yves, you were there with us, me and Olivier, and we were discussing that. How, from your perspective of obviously ICRC, but also from your personal perspective, your experience, you adapted this part? Because what Christopher brought, it's absolutely the thing we want to discuss. And Loris, be ready, because we want to hear from you as well soon after.
No, thank you, Emmanuel. I can be quite, I think that Christopher set the scene. I think, how do we anticipate to that? I think also in ICRC, as working in conflict areas, we're mostly there. I think it's MSF, it's ICRC, it's WHO, all the others. We're all on within the same missions. What we mostly try to do is what I try to put in 3 points. First is knowledge, proximity, know your community. The community is your first safety. Have the telephone numbers of all who is important. What is for me very important is that this preparation already starts before the conflict. I mean, it's not something you do, the conflict starts and say, oh, now we have to. No. Unfortunately, most of these conflicts happen in areas where, you know, you had previous conflicts. We call that protracted conflict. So it is an ongoing work by many colleagues to have the right network, to be in the community, to explain what you're there, what can they expect, what they cannot expect from you. That is also very important, the knows, and explain those why. So that is really that knowledge. And also when it comes to security within the ICRC is not something I'm doing as a medical person. I have trust in professional colleagues. We have a division, what they call SCMS, something like Security Management System Preparation, something like that. These are professional people. Quite often, some of them are ex-military, ex-police, who help in whatever measures are necessary in preparation of staff, but also in preparation of the facilities you work in. to bring that up to level to work as safe as possible in those environments. So I call that knowledge, and I trust on other people to do that. How do I build that trust? That's through preparation. Preparation goes very far. I can give the example for Gaza. So people are selected us to go there, but before somebody sets foot in Gaza, there are three separate, I would say, moments where people receive information. And the shorter we go to the beginning of the mission, the more concrete it comes, but it also helps the people to help in the mindset to prepare to go to this kind of operations. And there we are also totally transparent. It is what can people expect? Quite often we have a buddy system in place, like in the big operations, where you have a very experienced colleague looking over the back of a junior colleague, not only for the technical aspects, but also when it comes to security, when it comes to behavior, how does somebody reacts to that, and so on. And this is all very important and to have this kind of feeling of safety and to have this shared responsibility with everybody. And then the last point on that is also to maintain a certain discipline. I think that is very important. Discipline when it comes to curfews, disciplines when go to the shelter alarm is given, and so on. And on this you can also train. So we train, for example, on situations where you have a patient on the OT table, the alarm is given, go to the safe area, that people know that we have had these ethical reflection. What does it mean? Do I take the patient? Is the surgeon anesthesiologist staying with the patient? For example, all this is already discussed beforehand. And then the strict discipline, which is a code of conduct, one of those. And if there is a serious breach, I think it's important to immediately take the person out. And I stop here for the moment, and there probably will build up and there will be questions coming. Back to you, Emmanuel.
Thank you very much, Yves. And really, you brought also the, let's call it the individual dimension. And I think it's exactly, it's a word that we don't like, humanitarians, because we are all rebels, but discipline is actually the right word. And the next session with Lamia, there will be Hamdi, which definitely will bring some of his discipline that he's been giving to the security when I was in Ukraine with him. However, also you brought also the buddy system implicitly, everybody looking after the others, and the fundamental part of training, which is not only professional, but also individual, and it's a lot of knowledge. And definitely this is a lesson learned for this network, which also with Professor Mugavero, which has organized this session, and he didn't even want to open because he gave the floor to us. It's very nice of him, but however, this is something we are going to develop. I would like to now move to also Loris, because I remember, Loris, during our call, you were adding some other components of adaptability, operational level, which maybe could be really important. And also, just to mention, you probably are the one from the field. And I think you can also give a bit more of some of your personal impressions in this moment, because always this thing, once you come back home, you forget, right? Instead, we can hear from you. Over to Loris.
Yes, well, I will talk for sure about operational issues that we are facing at the moment, not only in Gaza but even in other places. I would talk about passive protection. For me, one important thing that we are doing, for instance, in Gaza, is the decentralization of critical services, as for instance the neonatal intensive care unit. Normally, the neonatal intensive care unit, you have the tendency to bring in a couple of hospitals, and this could lead to attack to the hospital, so mass casualties and problems very important related to the personnel, the health personnel. We took the decision in Gaza with the MOH to decentralize as much as we could, even with small hospitals, to give the opportunity to treat deliveries and newborns that they require assistance and critical care directly to the structure. So for the moment in Gaza, there are 10 more or less functional services of neonatal care unit, both of fourth level or third or second level. So there are different levels of aid that we can provide, some with ventilator, some with CPAP. But in any case, you have the opportunity for respiratory distress syndrome and for prematures to be treated. And this gives the opportunity even to continue and to be an alternative when a center is stopped or is unfortunately attacked by the forces to have an alternative. Another, I go quickly because another important issue on the passive protection is the bunkerization of fortification of structure. I remember our intervention with MSF, for instance, in Syria, where we decided not to occupy other structure or previous structures that were present in but to occupy places ballistically difficult to reach by bombing, like caves, as we did it. So an hospital in the cave, we were treating all kind of traumas, and so surgical intervention and all with of course, inflatable tents and other things that they can be brought inside a huge cave, or bunkerization in the third or fourth floor under the ground of certain buildings to give the opportunity to treat with a certain, let's say, safety. We know that, of course, there are bombs that they are, penetrating even different layers of on the ground, so could be dangerous. But of course, is much less dangerous than to work on a previous hospital that is already targeted. I remember that only in Syria in 2017 there were something like 75 health structure that were collapsed by Russian or Syrian forces. Another important thing, more on the active protection this time, is something that we don't take in consideration sometimes. So the community liaison and the community decision to do mobile units in different areas. So the importance of co-design with communities, the mobile clinics are crucial, in my opinion, in some areas, because they are not only mobile clinics, they becoming a mobile relationship that they can help on the proximity, the teams to move with the local endorsement, to use community chosen routes and stay consistent in contact with the traditional, let's say, power structure and in proximity with the people. No? And we have some example in Yemen, in South Sudan, and in other areas, in Congo as well. One last thing that I wanted to discuss was on the negotiation for the assets. Even if sometimes the deconfliction is a might, no, because we saw many situations where was absolutely impossible to trust the government or the army of the place. I have to say that in Gaza, despite a lot of problems that we are still facing, taking in consideration the level of bombing that is massive, is something very difficult to imagine, something more than this. We made and we can work with the NGOs and the agencies of the UN extensively in different parts of the situation. Even now that there is a restriction of action quite dramatic, there is the possibility to negotiate some activities. Of course, is complicated. Sometimes there were some important incidents, especially in the last year. But successfully, I would say, in a situation like this, with 47 kilometers and per 3 or per 4 with the bombing that is daily and very intense, the number of incidents is still low compared to the action that is brought in the ground. So I would really suggest to go on deep on this and even for other conflicts to see if it's possible to have this kind of activity. And there are other things, but the time is short.
Thank you, Loris, and very important points you raised. I think the part on the clinical care, and particularly on the infant care or the child care, it's absolutely fundamental. And also the last part on this access to healthcare, humanitarian access. I would give the floor also for, let's say, for adding a bit more to Olivier. Olivier, perhaps also from your background, which is very, very holistic, because you are medical doctor, you are nurse, you are EMT, and you have many things to bring. You might want to comment from different perspectives on also on the clinical part, and also to conclude on the humanitarian access.
Thank you very much, Emanuele. I would say there are two, three things that's going to my mind. First of all, I think a lot of things that has been said are said through the perspective of expat, and we really must put a lot of attention on the local health professional, local first responder, who are person who are doing most of the part of the job, and they are the most people who are at risk. That's why we also need to put a lot of attention to them, and also it could be done through the advocacy for the application of the international humanitarian law, but also some additional measure. The other thing is when we speak about security, very often the collaboration civil-military is coming on the top. And I think there are 2 points that I want to mention. First is when we collaborate with the military, we also, as humanitarian, we can become more, I would say, visible and become more a target. And it could put also our operation and our organization at risk, which is 1 point. The second point, we can also have some negative side effect. A very small story that happened in Haiti, 2010, when the US Army arrived to protect the University Hospital of Port-au-Prince. And in fact, they block the access of the parents who were inside the facility with their child, and the parents exit to get some food of medication, and they didn't find a way to enter and to be back with the family. That's why we can have also some negative aspect from the collaboration of the civil and military. That's really the point. Is first is a local health responder, extremely important, and also the potential, but also the negative effect and the risk collaboration with the military. And
thank you very much, Olivier, for this wrap up and for the final consideration. Perhaps in your session, Lamia, you will touch base also on this civil military part, because definitely we might have some comments from some people that they've been facilitating those things, and they can tell us what could be a negotiation that brings no risk, or let's say that decreases risk, because the observation is good, and it was done also by Christopher and by Loris, right? The proximity is good, but it has some risk too. So thank you very much. And I promised that I was selecting a couple of questions. So far, I found one. I will mention the question only. You want to read it, Lamia?
Yeah. So I think the question reflects on what measures are put in place for, let's say, expatriate staff or staff that is not local staff when they are deployed to a conflict area, for example, in relation to security assessment. Do you see any value of performing a security assessment before deploying staff to that location? And do you normally consider a standard structured evacuation plan in case the situation deteriorates? So this is the, let's say, question from the audience.
Assessments are done before deployment. It's not only on the logistical part, the technical part, but security is an important one for that. Nowadays, we have tools that things can be done much faster than, let's say, 10 years ago, but that is very important. And then in short also, and then I give it back to you, is yes, we have different kind of contingency plans. Also one, as I said, I mean, mobile staff is doing a substitution, which is temporary, but you are running the facility on local health staff. It's them who run overall the facility. So this kind of what we call a hot handover, where let's say you have 2 hours to hand over a hospital to so these contingency plans are being prepared so that you don't have to improvise on the moment itself. Back to you.
So security risk assessment is done prior to any deployment, particularly in high-risk areas. So that includes both strategic and operational level reviews in coordination with UNDSS. To mitigate the stuffs, we do the pre-deployment briefings, strict movement protocols, daily security updates. And on the end, when you mention an evacuation plan, that is structured and regularly updated evacuation plan, which include assembly points, transport contingency, coordination with other agencies, host country government framework, and etc. Hopefully that helped to give the answer. Thanks.
Thank you, Andy, for this important remark. We have another comment that I received also, which is about the importance of mental health, I would say. And there is a sort of PTSD, burnout, and so forth. I don't know if Loris and maybe Oliver, you want to take this too, or if one of you just come in voluntarily, and then we will move to the next session. Who wants to answer?
Well, just to start, I think is extremely useful, and what we have is one person in line that can give a support to the staff. Is it enough? No. Probably is good, as we had already before in so many emergencies with the NGOs. A person that is working exclusively for the team, both local staff and expatriates, in order to see especially the situation, the condition that are more critical. But then to have as well online the capacity to have someone who 24 hours a day can give a support, especially for the very harsh area.
No, what I wanted to complement is I think the body system is really one of the things that can really reduce also the impact on mental health, because also the senior can support also the junior. The diffusing system, in addition of the debriefing system, it's also something extremely important that can also reduce the impact. And last but not least, probably within the recruitment process, this is some aspect that needs to be touched and covered, because what the experience the people will go through will be part of I would say, their mind forever. And that's why the capacity of adaptation of each people who are recruiter is absolutely key. And this is one important element that really has to be evaluated during the recruitment. I stop here.
Thank you, Olivier. I think you touched base with one important thing. At recruitment level, we need to assess also this part. I just tell you, when I was recruiting people last year, I was always asking final questions saying, be aware, it's not only going to be this task, but this will be the context. Are you sure you feel to be in that? And no judgment if you don't, right? And so that's a very good point. Yves, do you want to put a final remark? And then I will give the floor to Lamia. Is there a question still?
What package are we prepared to offer to our teams that are deployed or come back from conflict zone or complex emergencies? And so I guess that Red Cross has a very extensive experience, and so you might be able to, with your closing remarks, even, let's say, elaborate a bit on this question. Thank you.
No, thank you. I think what is also important to mention is that in the preparation body, MHS, MHPSS, or mental health support on the ground is very important, but it's also the aftercare. So, and the aftercare, you can do that in a more formal way. You have access to whatever. But what we have done before, for example, we are running since more than a year this Gaza Field Hospital. And to give that example, it's also, we have an alumni group because people see, you know, it continues. People have spent time there, but it's also every time they hear again about a mass casualty incident or this hospital got now bombarded and this happened, is that within that space, we also have space again to come back on that, because people will kind of revive what they have seen, what they went through. So I just want to say that it's the care, the duty of care. It's in the preparation, hire the right people at the right place, prepare them, have buddy systems, have everything in place. And then of course you also have this aftercare, which is very important, and which can also help to brief other colleagues who go in. It's better that they're being briefed by somebody who went through the experience than somebody like me for the moment having a post in Geneva. No, it's much more added value that these people do that. And like you said, it's not a blame culture. If people say it's too much for me and I want to step out, you just do that. We don't ask questions. It's this kind of working, which is a lot of time, but it's also being a human being yourself and taking care of each other. And it doesn't stop when somebody ends his or her mission, but it continues afterwards. So, and this is what we try to do. It's not always easy, but what we try to do in the most missions we work. So let's stop here from my side. Back to you.
Thank you, Yves, because you really closed on the part of duty of care afterwards. Very implicitly and very unconsciously, we went through the whole cycle of that. So I think this was a very good conclusion, and also thank you to the people that was raising questions. I would like now to pass to the next session of this important webinar. But first of all, I want to thank Christopher that was online and now left, Loris that is following us from Warzone, Olivier, and finally Yves, because I'm really humbled. I honestly think this webinar was over my expectation now, because I was expecting much less, and there is so many things that came up. We took note. This will become definitely very inspirative for next, and I look forward now to the second half of it. I give the floor to Lamia. Again, thank you very much. Merci, grazie, gracias, and so on. Over.
Thank you, Emanuele, and thanks to the panelists for the super rich discussion. And please stay in, because we're going to try in the second session to complement with different elements the let's say the frame that you set. So the idea of the second session was really to focus a bit on preparedness. So, you know, in the current geopolitical landscape, we hear continuously, especially in the European region, the need to increase our readiness and preparedness level against all hazards, right? So we had the WHO launching their preparedness 2.0 framework in the last regional committee of Euro. We have the European Union launching the EU preparedness union strategy. So there is a lot of attention to make sure that we are ready for all hazards. And of course, for the scope of this webinar, let's say the attention is specifically to conflict and complex emergencies. So the idea is keeping the, let's say, practical approach and learning from experience. We have a very rich and let's say, diverse panel to go through analyze whether we feel that we are ready to protect our first responders and healthcare staff in case this scenario takes place in our region today. What challenges do we see to be ready, and how can we overcome them? And so I will, you know, thinking about, let's say, protection of first responders, I'll think about first responders starting from members of the community, being that volunteers, just people who happen to be there when an emergency takes place. But also, you know, you have the civil protection staff, and then you have healthcare workers, and you have volunteers. And that's why we have a panel where, let's say, we're going to touch expertise from each of these to really have a complementary, like a comprehensive picture. So without further ado, I'll give the floor to Paolo Vaccari, who is an expert of emergency management from the Italian Civil Protection. And I'll ask him to introduce himself briefly and to really elaborate on the fact what is the feeling? Are you ready? Do you think we are ready to protect our first responders today if an emergency as the one we described happens? And what are the challenges that you think we're facing in being ready to protect our staff? And also can you think about examples in your experience? You've been deployed on hundreds of complex emergencies. What worked to keep your people, your team safe? What went well? And what can we replicate potentially? Thank you very much, Paolo. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Just 2 words about myself. I'm an officer of the National Agency of the Civil Protection in Italy since more or less 20 years, and I've been deployed more or less for the last 20 years. And in some, let's say, complex situation, looking at the perspective of the civil protection, I cannot say that we have direct experience in conflict, but I would say several experience in complex emergency. It has been cited several times before during the first panel, example like South Sudan, like Haiti or Libya. Exactly. These are the kind of experience that I had from the last deployment had longer my experience. So there has been, I'm quite interested about what has been said in the first panel, because a lot of keywords came to my mind, and I would say that I completely review the things that I would that I want to say. I've seen several let's say keywords that for me, that from the perspective of a civil protection, from a perspective of let's say a civil servant, from the perspective of someone that worked for government and represent the government when he's abroad, are the kind of approach that we normally use when we have deployment. And I've seen the word disciplines. I know that disciplines, unfortunately, I don't have any kind of military background, but I have to say that discipline, to respect rules, to respect, let's say, our standard, our system, our communication is one of the key. I think that sometimes, I normally deal quite a lot with volunteers, and there's fantastic people that they have, they put their heart, they have also great experience. Volunteers that are coming from medical services, for example. But sometimes they forgot that we, in some situation, we need to work definitely with the structure system. Otherwise, we lose the control, we lose the capacity to protect ourselves. There has been said something that is very, very important before. The fact that we always speak about from the perspective of the expatriate. And we need to focus on the first responder, from the local responder. I think that there is a huge work that should be done in this way. Italy, is part of what is called the Union Civil Protection Mechanism. That is a large system of solidarity built by the European Union more or less 20 years ago. And the mechanism invests several million of euros in preparedness all around the world. We don't want to, let's say, we do not expect that we, as the civil protection of the rich country from Europe, we solve all the problem all around the world. We want to build the capacity locally. And this is one of the key points. There's several projects that are investing on that. And I think that this kind of preparedness is is one of the most important thing. And one of the key, I would say, is that probably in this kind of environment where we are now, the situation where we live, is that probably example of the investment like the white helmets that happen in Syria is one of the best system that we can do. Really, one of the main problem for us is that we do not have access to some countries. There's, I mean, it has been, I mean, I heard all what has been said by Loris about the situation in Gaza. I know quite well, even if we're not being able to be deployed in Gaza, we tried to negotiate several times the access in the area. The only things that we can do actually is to proceed to evacuation of patients from Gaza to European hospital. It's nothing, but it's something that we can do it. That's the only thing. And unfortunately, this is more or less the same situation we have with Ukraine. We cannot access to Ukraine. We can support our colleagues in Ukraine, and we do, for example, 1,000 medevacs every year. So let's say from our side, this is a very complex situation. Going back to your point, Lamia, you said how we prepared or what we are doing in terms of this kind of all risk approach in Europe. I want to show you just one thing that I think is quite significant for me. That is what is going on since last year in Sweden. So this is a leaflet that has been distributed to all Swedish. The title is "In Case of Crisis or War." And look at the contents. You can see there's what I underline, how to stop bleeding, for example. This is quite significant. I mean, this is one of the key for preparation for those people that are involved more or less directly in conflict zone. And I want to show one more thing is that what kind of preparation that many teams in Europe have for international deployment, and it's this one. Just I hope that it works. Yeah, many teams are taking part on this kind of courses that are military courses, where one let's say one of the main aspects is to focus on massive bleeding again. This is, I think, is it's really significant. The fact that Europe is moving quite fast in preparation of for internal crisis, as well as for new kind of projection outside of Europe in this kind of complex environment. I'm not saying that we're prepared, but definitely there's a way on this direction. And I will stop here, otherwise my colleagues cannot say anything.
Thank you very much, Paolo. That was really useful because it was essentially the ideal introduction to the next speaker. But before I move on, I would like to ask one question because you mentioned, so I think you touched on the most important aspect is, are we ready? So which means how are we training our first responders? How are we training our people? And you show that there are two aspects to that. One is the training of the community, because you mentioned that it's critical to have the community to understand how to stay safe, because the first responders are often part of the community. And so that is one dimension. And the second dimension that you touched is about the, let's say, the technical training for the first, let's say, responders. And so you were looking at the tactical medicine, which I would say covers a lot of aspects of what are the injuries, let's say, from a medical perspective that we can look at. But do you think that from a safety and protection point of view, today, do we have enough elements of safety around let's say, the context of conflict and complex emergencies as part of the training of our first responders already integrated, or is there room there to integrate something and reflect more?
I would say that in general terms, if we talk about personnel from the first responder that, I mean, let's say professional teams that can be deployed abroad, the answer is absolutely yes. Regarding the first responder in the country, I would say that all of our first responder, they know how to, let's say, protect themselves in very critical situation, even if they never experience a conflict directly. What they need is to have a guide, and the guide will be the authority that will take the control in case of conflict. And this is the last one thing that I missed to say before, and this is something that is very, very important for me to say. When we are deployed abroad, one of the main things for us is to have the support of our intelligence. Without intelligence, we never act in a country that has, let's say, a complex emergency in act. So that's important for us.
Thank you very, very much for this comprehensive answer. I think you already somehow set the tone for the next speaker, because we covered, let's say, the community, the first responders coming, so let's say, volunteers. So we covered the civil protection dimension, but now we started to touch upon the medical dimension. And so the next speaker is Rafael Castro Delgado, who's a senior emergency physician who has years and years of experience in training pre-hospital care, and also coordinator of the Master in Public Health and Disasters. And so, Rafa, I'll ask you to briefly introduce yourself and to reflect a bit on what Paolo was saying, but from a medical perspective. So today, if we will face a situation, say in your country, where there is a situation of conflict or a complex emergency, do you feel that the paramedics or the pre-hospital care medicine system would be ready to be safe as they deliver care? I'm not asking more on the technical aspect, but I'm more saying, would they know how to stay safe? And because Paolo was mentioning the dimension of, they would know as far as somebody tells them if it's clear to go. But here I'm more asking, is it part of their training? Is there something that can be done or should be done from a medical perspective? So, Rafa, the floor is yours.
First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. I will try to give my perspective as a pre-hospital doctor with more than 20 years of experience in the civilian EMS. I think that security issues are in our DNA. I mean, everybody working in the pre-hospital care, we are concerned about our security, but we have to bear in mind that conflict it's something more. I would like to put just some slides while I'm talking. I will share my screen. Perfect. One of the main points is that EMS, we should be prepared for our risks, and different places have different risks. So we have to be prepared for natural risk or industrial, and we have to be prepared for conflicts or not. And Paolo told that something related to intelligence. We need to know if our country is under risk, and once our Army, intelligence service, whoever decides that probably we are the risk, we should start to be prepared for that at different levels, strategy level, planning level, but also operational level and training. Because EMS is something more that ambulance is going to treat somebody. It's related to public health, it's related to healthcare, it's related to public safety, and even there are different models in different countries. Some of them depends on civil defense, other ones depends on public health service. And of course, in conflicts, there are challenges that we have to face. Of course, there are some type of clinical aspects, Mostly, I think that we would cover 95% of these clinical aspects. I mean, we know how to treat amputation, severe bleeding, blast injuries. But the main concern for us is to be prepared to direct threats, the access to the victims and our security. We are not used to use protective gear, bulletproof protective gear, for instance. But also in conflicts, we will also have displaced populations with other public health issues. And this is why interagency coordination is essential. And it's essential that we have to cooperate with police and the army. We are very good in clinical aspects. Probably we are not so good in security aspects in conflict areas. So, but police and the army, they are very good in security, and probably they have some lack of clinical aspects. So we have to work together once the risk has been detected. Nowadays in Spain, let's say, I think we are not under risk of war. But what about Estonia or Letonia? You never know. It's another part. So the EMS should be prepared for the risks. And very important, we are civilians. So we have a civilian approach. We have a civilian staff. This is very important for the emotional approach. I mean, you are telling the civilians, EMS, that they are in a conflict country, in their own country, and that they will have to work in a conflict situation. So some approaches, very general. We need probably specialist training in operational and hostile environment. We need to be prepared to use personal protective gear. Of course, we have to coordinate if there is a risk of conflict with the military and the army. Limited access to victims. Okay, probably in these regions, we will have to change our vehicles to work operational in more tactical advanced medical posts, or even the use of drones. Of course, the system will be overwhelmed, so we are part of the system. We have to be used to use triage systems, source capacity, preposition staff. We have to collaborate with field hospitals or NGOs that may have more expertise in conflict areas. And of course, a key point is the coordination and resources. This is not that the ambulance enter a place where a rocket has impacted, but there should be a coordination between the intelligence, the army, the EMS, the civil protection. So that's mainly my main approach. In big cities here in Spain, like Madrid or Barcelona, they have specific teams that are within the civil EMS, that they are trained to work in riots, demonstrations, terrorist attacks. So perhaps these internal teams they have should be the ones that will be the leadership of our training, together with the army and together with the police, in case we detect that there's a risk for conflict in our country. That's my approach, what I think.
Thank you very much, Rafa. It was very comprehensive. I think I have two questions, because so you touched upon very interesting points. The first one is part of our preparedness is also personal protective equipment. So according to the hazard that we face, we must be sure that we are ready also from that standpoint. And that is going to be touched within this session a little bit later on. And then you mentioned, in case of, like, say, difficult situation, might that be a violent situation or even a conflict, of course we need to coordinate with other agency, and you refer to, of course, the police, the army. But I think, and I guess that the same line we hear from Paulo when he was talking about the civil protection, which of course it is, the setup is different and the organization is different in each country, but in principle is very closely linked to the, let's say, the government of that country. But I would like to hear my humanitarian colleagues, because I think they might have something to say with regards to civil-military, let's say, collaboration in a conflict zone. Because, of course, I hear your standpoint, but on another note, what are the limitations and what are the risks with the relationship with the military, you talked about intelligence, for example. So you talked about having insights from the military, helping you to make a decision. Of course, then you know, the second next speaker will elaborate on that, but I would like to hear from my humanitarian colleagues. I don't know if Eve is still there. What do you think about that?
I think, I just pose a question myself, if I could understand it. It's about civil-military cooperation. And as such, there are advantages, but are there also limitations to this? But it's a very sensitive point, and I think a straightforward answer would be wrong. It is very important working in a conflict that you have contact with all the armed groups, being it more étatique and non-étatique state and non-state armed groups, as we call it. But it is very important at least to communicate what you are doing, why you are there, who you are working for. But at the same time, you also have to be very clear about the limitations, what you yourself as an organization can say and interact. So I think that is very important. And again, it is also important that you do this with colleagues who understand these people. So within an ICRC Red Cross, we have what they call the FAST department. These are previous senior military officers or police officers who are used to, translate these messages and so on, and are used to have this kind of conversation. So I think that is also very important if we speak about professionalism, that you have the right people with the right skill sets to pass on these messages and to have this exchange. So I would rather have to give a word, but they're not here, on a FAST colleague who could be more nuanced into that. But back to you. I hope I answered the question.
Thank you very much, Eve. I see Rafa, you raised your hand. Do you want to come in?
Yes, I want, when we are talking about conflicts, how to be prepared for conflicts. I remember that 20 years ago, I was the first civilian that did the advanced tactical combat casualty care in our army. What I saw there, and I think that situation is the same. Army doctors and paramedics, my perception is that their clinical knowledge could be improved. How could be improved? By joining daily civilian EMS. And on the other side, civilian EMS, we have a lack of knowledge in some security issues related to conflicts. How can we improve that? By cooperating with the army, paramedics, or doctors. I mean, it's a joint war. It's a place where we work together so that, and I don't want you misunderstood me, but me as
it's very clear. Thank you very much.
As a civilian EMS, I need training for what the army is very good, and the army healthcare paramedics or whatever, they need some more training in which civilian EMS is very good.
Thank you, Rafa. Thank you. I have one hand. I think Olivier has his hand up. Olivier, you have 1 minute because we're already running late, because I am known not to be very good at time management. Olivier, the floor is yours.
Another thing that needs to be taken into consideration is also the fact that the first responder is, if we look from the expat perspective, is representing also an organization. And a misbehavior or a wrong decision could really jeopardize the entire deployment of an organization and can lead sometime to the kick out of the organization from the country. That's why the responsibility of the first responder is something that's really need to be highlighted and also trained, and I would say stressed to be sure that they realize that they represent an organization. And thanks to Paolo to insist on the local first responder.
Thank you very much, Olivier. No, very relevant point, in fact. Okay, so I think I would like to introduce the next speaker, because one of the things that was mentioned by Rafa was the fact that you know, we are going to be ready and be trained on, you know, how to stay safe in conflict when somebody tells us the conflict is coming. So now I would like to somehow reflect on, do we really need to wait until the risk assessment tells us that the risk is high in order to start getting ready? Because how long will it then take? And so now the next speaker is Maxim Kustov. So Maxim is an expert in training of first responders at the National University of Civil Protection in Kharkiv, Ukraine, now based in Cherkasy. But I would like, first of all, to ask you to introduce yourself, but also to reflect on if you could go back and do things differently 3 years down the line from the start of the war in Ukraine. How would you do things differently in terms of training the first responders? If you know, how did you adapt the training that you're doing to what you know now, right? What can we learn from you and from the experience of Ukraine? Thank you, Maxim. The floor is yours.
Okay, I shortly introduce myself. I head of research laboratory of cyber and safety and threat analysis in National University of Civil Protection of Ukraine, and our university located in Kharkiv city. First 2 years we were in the city, and we located in about 30 kilometers to Russia border and one time first maybe 2-3 months the battle line was inside our city, and I can see on this problem military conflict not only as first responders and as ordinary population. Already many important points we're talking today, and generally I agree with it. Maybe I will repeat some point, but I want to talk the point on this problem from my side, and when we see about previous speaker said about the conflict in Gaza, in Syria, in Sudan, I recognize many similar points, but I want to pay your attention on the specific between this conflict and conflict in Ukraine. For example, if we say about Gaza conflict, this is enough small country, and all countries the general hot point. But in Ukraine is enough big country, and in Ukraine we have a very big different situation in west part of Ukraine and east part of Ukraine. And in Ukraine we have a clear battle line, and we understand the distance between battle line. On my opinion, in if we say about Libya and Syria, in this country, many small hot points on all territory of Ukraine. So the specific of conflict in Ukraine for first responders and actually for medical staff, we have 3 different zones for and in each this zone they make different actions. First zone is less than 5 kilometers before battle line, and in this zone the population less than 5%. All population we try to evacuate it, and in this zone is a small line near the battle line. In this zone, if we say about medical staff, work only military medics, because all civilian medics evacuated from this zone. Second part, second zone, is about 50 kilometers from the battle line. On this zone, the population more than 50%, before war conflict, and so we have many civilian people, and in this zone work civilian military personnel, and on my opinion, it's a main dangerous zone because many civilian people, short distance before battle line, many missiles attack, artillery guns, and of course, as already we discussed, most dangerous part is drones. And in this zone, all ambulance car work with special equipment, special radar for protecting a car from the drones. And I want to pay your attention and discuss today on this zone in the less than 50 kilometers from the battle line, because other part, if we say about other part of Ukraine, the situation is more dangerous because the alarm system can enough time for prepare a population and for prepare first responders for action and for attack on this, because in a war conflict zone, the most dangerous for medical staff, for first responders, it's a unexpected missiles attack and drones attack, because alarm system does not have enough time for react on it. And if we say about dangers, about differences and specific between civilian and military medicals, about what we discuss today, Rafa present today risks, natural, industrial, and conflicts, but this risks, it's very different for medical staff, because when we say about natural and industry accident, the medical staff work in a green zone where they cannot dangerous for the medical staff. We as first responders, we know that red, yellow, and green zone, and in a natural and industrial accidents, medical staff work only in a green zone where we don't have dangerous. If we say about military conflict, the military personnel cannot work in a safe zone because we don't have a safe zone. And most important to the specific of a military medics group, as Paul and Rafa today pay attention about cooperation between military and civilian medicals, because in conflict zone, civilian medicals should work with rules of military medics, because they located on the dangerous zone, and they should work in a such difficult situation, because as I know, the military medical has three zones too, red, yellow, green too, but it's a very big difference with civilian rescuers, because for example, in a red zone, military medical can only evacuated personnel, not action for safe injured people. So for preparation in such situation like a military conflict, first of all, if it's a coordination and training together civilian and military medical personnel because we have a many specific military specific for medical personnel, but in general in a war conflict zone for safe civilian people work as civilian rescue, civilian military, civilian medical personnel, and they should to know how to act in these conditions.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry I have to cut you because the time is really running short. It was a very interesting reflection and a lot to learn from Ukraine. I would like, before moving on to the next presentation, actually to answer one question. So the question is in relation to, is there any, because you reflected on risk assessment. So you said there are, different areas of risk in the field. They bring different, let's say, different approaches and different procedures. So according to the proximity to the front line or the type of threats that we see, according to that risk level, then we act differently. And also the importance of having, let's say, civilian healthcare staff to consider how military normally acts in terms of safety procedures to deliver care along those front lines, but staying safe. So it's a bit what Rafa was saying before. It's about learning from others how to stay safe because they are used to do that, let's say. But then there is another question from the public. It's about how to deal with double tap attacks, which is something that unfortunately Ukraine knows. So I was wondering whether maybe Emanuele could pick this up. Emanuele.
So the answer is, as far as I know, there is not an available guidance. I think this will be definitely the focus on which I will put my work in the next years. But maybe also the next answerer from Amdi can give us a bit of his perspective also. I know, Amdi, you are presenting a lot of things, but consider also a 1 minute on, from your perspective, I think you've been in several wars. When there is double tap, what are the 2 or 3 basic things to consider? Really practical. I know you are practical, man. So I give the floor back to Lamia and then over.
Thank you, Emanuele. No, I think it is, again, this conversation is just flowing because everyone is just concluding with the introduction to the next speaker. So I think it's super interesting how everything is really connected. So what we mentioned so far is, how do we prepare? How do we train? How do we make sure we have everything in place in order to stay safe? But then there is, and what about when we are in place? So when we are in the field, we touched upon the importance of having SOPs and security guidelines and have them very followed and powered and enforced but the point is obviously that there are many challenges around it, and I think Hamdija Ajavi, he's otherwise known as Amdi, he's a really senior security expert. He's been pretty much everywhere in the past 15 years, and so I think we work together in Ukraine. And he looks, I can't even say he looks young. Emanuele is saying that he looks young, but he's not that young. I'm like, kidding. No, of course, it's a pleasure to have you. And so I would like to ask you to introduce yourself a bit and to try to really follow along with the reflection on when you are in the field and you have to manage a group of people like me or Emanuele, what are the things that worked? What can help you to keep them safe? We talk about security protocols, decision making. What in your experience keeps the first responders safe? What is challenging? How can you convince us to behave and follow these security protocols, knowing that that's the most important thing? And last but not least, what Emanuele was saying, and there are things that go outside our control that expose us. For example, new warfare techniques, and double tapping being one of them. Is there anything specific that you want to comment on how to stay safe on that aspect too? Thank you, Hamdi. The floor is yours.
First of all, thank you very much for invitation, and thank you very much for so many questions. I don't know, this is the coming from Emanuele. He trying to make my life miserable. So let me introduce myself. My name is Hamdi Hadjavdic. I'm the Bosnian, currently working as a WHO security lead in Ukraine last 4 years, 3.5 years. Prior to that, I was in different organization, again in Ukraine, and prior to that, I was 14.5 years Iraq and Afghanistan working down there. Now, regarding the questions, I learned that in conflict and complex emergency situations, the key is a protocol, and he is only as strong as the people willing to follow it. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So we can have the best SOPs, we can have the best briefings, we can have best risk assessment, but if the command and control system is not functioning or the staff don't comply, those procedures remain theoretical. Simple as that. Okay. So I will shortly do this in the double tap. We call this double tap what we are seeing more and more often in Ukraine, where all the agencies, NGOs, INGOs are mentioning. I have that, unfortunately, in 1992, I saw that, but we call it a silent killer because everybody rushing on the spot to help people. And it is like human beings are like that, like let's rush in that. And if we come faster, we're gonna save somebody faster. But in reality, in war zones, and especially in the area, the areas like Ukraine, Gaza, and areas like where the intelligence, military, and everybody is involved in that, it's very hard to conduct a job as a first responder. It doesn't matter what type of training you have. It's very hard. It's very hard to evaluate is that double tap is going to happen. So we have a couple of situations in Ukraine that I noticed, like oncology hospital was attacked by the missiles, lots of the injuries, but in one moment there was so many people down there. I think that approximately, and don't keep me for the word, that was approximately 400 people down there. We are talking about emergency responders, we're talking about EOD technicians, we're talking about police members, we're talking about intelligence members that they are down there, but also we are talking about a bunch of the civilians that they come on the site now for one reason or another reason. Did they come to see their family members? Are they alive? Or they're, like they just come to as a human being to help? Even that you are doing that, my opinion is wrong. It should be clear command and control. What I mean by that is in emergency, decision often needs to be made fast and under the pressure. This means leadership must have the clear structures. Who gives go or no go instructions? Who makes the tactical decisions? I'm sorry for tactical decision. This is like more military slang, but who's making proper decisions on the ground? Who is monitoring compliances? Who is lack of the clarity here leads to the how can I say that dangerous improvisations. And like if we don't have clear command and control, we have a mess. We have a couple of situations in WHO, and Emanuele, remember that we was on 25th August on 2024, we have close encounter of 40 missiles was landed around our interagency convoys. Luckily, the team was on the ground because the security who was responsible for that, it was me. I have that military approach that everybody must follow the current SOPs that we have it. Do you like it or not like it? It's something irrelevant in that moment. So luckily there was on the ground. Nobody was not injured. Our vehicles was damaged. After action review show us more problems that we faced that day. What happened? People didn't have the IFACs with them because they forgot them in the home. People didn't have the radios with them. They forgot them on backpacks or in cars, or they didn't bring the batteries with them. So this is one of the points that we are talking about compliances. This is the most underestimated part of the safety. Let me, like I already give you one concrete example, but second one, like again, WHO security, specifically in Ukraine, are now pushing prior to the departure. We are visually checking every item on every personnel. So which means documents, individual first aid kit, radio, personal protection equipment, which is considered helmet and body armor. We have people that they was taking plates from the body armor because it's too heavy. So that is, it's not only bringing the risk to the person that is doing that, but also bringing the risk to overall to the organization. Again, one of the problems that I saw, it is like, it won't happen to me. I know what I'm doing. We have missiles that they are 1.2 tons heavier. We have missiles that they are 1.6 tons. We have the Cubs that they are 3.5 tons. We have UAVs that they have warhead of 50 kilograms. We have the cluster ammunition. We have debris that they are falling from the Patriot system or different types of like, but again, we still have the people, they are not in compliances for one reason or another reason. So it is something that we need to work hard on that prior with all this command and control, but we also need to work hardly on compliances. And that is, by my opinion, it's not only management responsible that it's only law, it's also the supervisors of those persons. I cannot do that because he's working hard job. Everybody's working hard job. Everybody, whoever is working hard, unbelievable job. Medical nurses, first responders, cluster teams, emergency teams, rehab teams, everybody working hard job. But if you are not in compliances with that, then you are all of that you can put in water because it's going to create more mess. Yeah, I have two more points and I don't want to take too much time. So one of the points that I want to stress also is culture. Safety must be part of the mission culture, not something that is enforced by the security, but embedded in how we operate. That is why I always say that it is, don't just train the staff because we need to do that. I'm trying to train the mindset of the people. When people understand that procedures aren't bureaucracy, but survival tool, then being on to own, they began to own their security. So that is one of the simple notes, because everybody, when they come in Ukraine, why do I need to do this training? Or why do I need to do that? I'm so busy, you know? So we have like, and also, I think that Paolo mentioned that, which is, I like it, and I'm trying to push that, the trauma training. Currently, we have less than half a day, which is absolutely wrong. Trauma training should be proper trauma training, minimum 3 days that we teach people what means massive hemorrhage, how we deal with that, how we stop it. In this environment, like we have Gaza, I don't know, and currently Ukraine and Gaza are the worst case scenarios in the world, you know. And one, just wanna stress one more point is like guarantees and notification systems, operational retalities. We focusing on that. Everybody is mentioning that, but that's not working in reality. So let me clear you. Humanitarian notification system, windows of silence, how we used it before in 2014. The confliction guarantees are essential in theory, but often unreliable in practice. Because example, we have in Ukraine agents that we need to send Russians, we never get response, but we consider that as a mitigation measure, which is absolutely wrong. Instead of creating new mitigation measures, which include contingency beyond formal guarantees, we are not doing that. And we are putting in risk everybody who is going close to the front line, 5 kilometers, 7 kilometers, 3 kilometers. Myself, Mr. Dr. Emanuele and myself, we've been in so much situations and so close to the front lines that we was even one time joking, which is outgoing, which is incoming missile. On the end, I just want to send to protect the first responders on a film. There should be triangle: clear authority, consistent enforcement, and personal responsibilities. If any of these tools fails, risk multiplies. Thank you.
We even got an applause from the public. Yeah, just saying. So. No, thank you very, very much. It was, but I think you outlined the 3 very critical elements. So one is command and control. So we need to have a system in place. People must follow, basta. So it's a bit what we heard from others. So there are rules in place. You must enforce them with discipline, because you don't only expose yourself, but you expose also your organization. Second, security is a culture. So you have to understand that the way you think around it, yes, your let's say line manager will be the one who needs to make the decision to send you home if you're not following the rules, but ultimately the security and thinking how to behave is something that should come natural to you as part of your, let's say, normal behavior with the rest of the team. And last but not least is, yes, let's, when we make decisions, for example, or go, no go, we have system in place that we consider like the notification or the deconfliction. We consider the mitigations. We let others know that we're being there, feeling like, okay, it's a mitigation. We told them that somehow we will go. But as we know that we don't really receive any feedback about that, do we really have to consider it a mitigation, or should we rather focus on other things that might be stronger in protecting first responders? So these, I think, were very three key aspects. And I thank you very much. I don't know if there is any question, but as we're running a bit late, let me see question. Oof. Okay. Let us give the floor to our last speaker, who will tag along with the discussion on personal protective equipment. So it was already mentioned several times. So how can we be ready about trainings and etc. But in practice, now we are in a conflict zone, and so we are exposed to threats that might require us. So like for COVID, we have, the gel, the mask, but for conflict, do we have anything specific? Because the fact is that there is very little evidence, and why so? Because in conflict, it's difficult to collect good quality data on what are the personal protective equipment that should really be used. And so that's why we see a lot of different practices. Yeah. So every organization, every agency chooses a different way of doing business. So what are we going to do? Are we going to use them if anything like a conflict or a complex emergency happens in the European region today? What is the position that should we be taking? So I'm going to ask now Zubair Al-Azad, who is here today with us, who's an expert in technology, in fact, who elaborate, first of all, to introduce himself, but also to elaborate a bit on the role of PPE in protection of first responders in these settings, and maybe on the potential challenges that this might carry. So thank you so much, Zubair. The floor is yours.
Thank you. One of the benefits of being the last speaker is I can always piggyback on all the great insights from everyone who's already spoken, and to hopefully leave with you some imagery for something that will really stick in your minds as we conclude the day. My name is Zubair Azad. I'm with Deloitte. I focus on health and humanitarian supply chains. We did a lot of work studying the effectiveness of different PPE strategies, and then literally on the ground when we had to stand up entire supply chains related to medical countermeasures, literally going in, receiving goods, all the raw materials to make a product, et cetera, et cetera. So I actually think a lot of what I had to say has already been covered. I think somebody already mentioned the case studies from the white helmets, for example, and what they did, especially the emphasis on local responders and local supply chains and manufacturing, et cetera. And I don't think I really need to, evangelize too much on the importance of contextual relevance in the types of PPE that we're using, whether it's ballistic protection in urban combat zones, chemical protection in areas of high toxic exposure risk, or the protection for infection control in disaster zone. I mean, all of these is different strategies, and there's different trade-offs. So if anything, probably the image that I'd like to leave the audience with is, as a case, for instance, some work that my esteemed colleague, Dr. Rocco Casagrande, did during his time as a UN bioweapons inspector. You can tell just how heavily enclosed he is, and how heavy the various layers of personal protective equipment he's wearing, because at this time we don't know yet if this unexploded ordnance is yet what type of biological agent it's creating. So that you can see with his equipment, they don't know whether it's some kind of transdermal nerve agent. I think at the time they suspected it might have been sarin. But it really makes it difficult to move around and be agile when you're under all of this protective layer. But once they did identify, I think they identified it as anthrax spores, which of course is still very dangerous, but it's something that you need protection just with your nasal cavity. They were able to strip it down quite a bit more. And with this lighter PPE, they were able to handle their instruments much more effectively. So having that contextual relevance, it was really important for them and very, very important in disarming and neutralizing the danger. But I think that's an area where it's a lot of different trainings to do if you have to prepare for all kinds of different types of scenarios and dangerous scenarios. So it is a challenge. I think it's something worth calling out and something worth considering as we move forward.
Thank you so much. And of course, now we are almost at, concluding our time, and I take full responsibility for the delay. I think it was an incredibly very comprehensive discussion, and I'm happy even if we're running slightly late. And what I would like, before giving 30 seconds, it was initially planned to be 1 minute to each, but 30 seconds to each of the speakers to touch upon the two main takeaways they would like the audience to go home with, thinking these are the two things that will keep my people safer, so I will go do them. I would like to ask one question to my humanitarian colleagues on the use of PPE, because I think that other than the technical details, do we have the exact one that is needed for the specific threats? And do we have ones for, let's say, bigger people, or do we have ones for females? Do we, what are we missing from a technical standpoint? I would like to ask, I don't know if Olivier is still there, or if Eve is still there, or if Loris is still able to hear us. I would like to, for one of them to pick this question and think about, is that okay for humanitarians to use PPE or not? Because I have been in every war zone in the past 15 years. And to be honest, I wore PPE for the first time in Ukraine, and not all the times. And it was not because I wasn't following the rules, Hamdi. I wore it every time you told me to. But I think it was more, there are issues in relation to perception of wearing the PPEs. And so I would like, Eve, thank you for raising your hand. Please take the question.
A bit the same experience as you have. I mean, when I did my field work, 15 years ago when I started, Afghanistan, first place, Kandahar, PPE, no. Armored cars, no. I think the first time that we started using kind of armed vehicles, a bit Land Cruisers, which were a bit bulletproof, was, I think, Ukraine is one of the first times. I can be wrong, so I can't be quoted on that, but in my memory, it goes back to them. And then, of course, in the beginning, when the first people have to wear PPE, you don't have the right sizes, it's this, that, such, and so on. So there we had to make a learning curve. But we try not to use it if we don't have to be honest. Part has to do with perception. As I said, it are my professional security colleagues who will indicate, now it's time to wear it. And so on. So it's not something that immediately comes up in my mind. If I have a bucket list like PPE, yeah, I would think more medical PPE, COVID related, but not really bullet related, to be honest. So it's a bit the same perception. I think we're becoming more professional into this. I'm sure in Gaza context, in Ukraine contexts, it's being used. I think also sometimes nowadays in Afghanistan context, but it's not, I would say, a general rule. But that's my personal opinion. Don't quote me on that. Back to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, great. So we are only 2 minutes late. So now we have 30 seconds for a really like 2-3 main points, main takeaway for our people. How do we keep our people safe? Let's start from the beginning. Paolo, your 30 seconds are up.
I will need less than 30 seconds, and I will only to focus on one point that has been in some ways already said by several people. I would say to have the capacity to assess the situation and decide for an exit strategy. This is a very courageous and important responsibility.
Thank you very much. Rafa, 2-3 main takeaways.
So from the civilian point of view, first of all, risk assessment, we should know what the state of our country, and if we should start working prior that the risk arrives, and there should be a collaboration between Army, Police, and civilian EMS. We have to identify the strength of each of us, and we have to give our strength to the others.
Thank you very much. Maxime.
Two main positions that I want to say about today our conversation. First of all, it's good prepare civilian medicals with specific of military medical corps, medical personnel. And second, it's a strong coordination structure for coordination, and strong rules for action in emergency and military zone.
Thank you very much. And Zubair, your 30 seconds are up.
Preparation. I think if there's one word that we need to watch, as unfortunate as it is to say, disasters and war zones and conflict zones almost seems like an inevitability for the foreseeable future. So we must do all we can to prepare.
Thanks a lot. I think now we're really closing. And Emanuele, would you like to say have your 30 seconds to have let's say 2 important takeaways and to help me closing the session?
I belong to the generation and which actually started with PPEs in the field. I mean, being a bit later starting, but it's 15 years ago I started, but in the field. And I think this is a game changer because there is it's not only the fact that we became more aware, but really the warfare has changed. And so we need to be aware of these 2 points. We are more aware, but also things have changed. So this is definitely one component we have to add when it's about preparedness, but also all the operational things that were raised these days, today about this proximity, the notification and everything that was mentioned by Hamdi as well and the others. Perhaps it would be good to ask Roberto to come before you close, Lamia.
A couple of years ago, before the conflict in Ukraine, and we started just an event, a cooperation with the University of Civil Defense of Ukraine, with the European Center for Disaster Medicine, but focusing in general, Maxim, we were focusing cooperation on training, right? Firefighters, civil defense, civil protection. And after that, sadly, the conflict started. And at that point, we realized that from the real, from the ground, experiencing the real situation on the ground, the protection of first responders experienced by our colleagues in Ukraine was not so sound. Because Maxim, if you want to just to add a couple of words about this, we published the research, a 1-year research, about what the Ukrainian first responders, EMS, fire brigade teams, civil protection teams experienced. And it was really something shocking, in my opinion. It was a very big lesson learned. And for that, especially our center considered that one of the mandates for 2024, 2025, at least at European level, Council European level, was to highlight their experience. That could be an everybody's experience. We were talking about the possibility, the chance to be deployed in another country. And Maximi, if you want just to add 2 words about what we did with the research about the protection of first responders, 20 seconds.
Thank you, Roberto. Yes, we try to collect our first experience on this research because it was first half year of this war, and it was our first experience, first our mention, first our thinking, and we try to collect all branches of safety and securities. Of course, now we already can add something new, but in general, it's a unique opportunity to learn more about the real situation in Ukraine. Thank you for this opportunity, Robert.
Well, okay, so I think we're really closing now. It's only 12 minutes delay. I just want to say massive thank you to CEMEC for bringing this together and creating a momentum on this very critical topic, and for giving a big thank you to all the speakers that came today to join the 2 sessions that really took the time to reflect on this and to share their experience. A big thank you to the almost 150, 200 people that joined this conference. The thing is, there is so much more to say. So we're going to follow up with sharing information, sharing the main takeaways of this, but also asking you feedback on what comes next. So big thank you to everyone, and I'm happy to close the day. Please stay safe, everyone, and see you at the next one.